You're listening to the latest edition of The Hurt Locker, a podcast that opens the door to men's mental health. And tonight's guest, we have Tom Mahony. Tom, I've said that wrong, haven't I?
No, you nailed it. You nailed it, man. Well done. I was just waiting. I said, here we go. Yinka is going to absolutely drop the ball. Nah, you nailed it. You only heard it once and you nailed it. Well done.
Okay. Thank you. Tom, welcome to the Hurt Locker.
Delighted
How are you?
to be here. Great. I'm in good form. This evening. The sun is shining. I've only got one busted finger from hitting it with a lump hammer accidentally at the weekend during we're building a house at the moment. So, but it's all right. I've got 9 more, Yinka. It's okay. It's all right.
Okay. So, you just said then you're good at the moment, the sunshine, and that. Where are you in the world at this moment in time?
I am in a place called South Tipperary, which would be, I suppose, 3/4 of the way down the island of Ireland. We're just south of the median line that would be, the Midlands or whatever. So it's it's good place. It's proper rural. I'm originally from here, and we were living in Dublin like 14 years, and during lockdown my very Dublin wife went, "Can we just move to the country, please?" So yeah, all right.
Okay, so we're going to touch on your move, your migration, etc. But for the benefits of our listeners, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me how you've arrived to where you're at now. What have you done in your life?
By God, I think we're going to need our own series here, Yinka. I'm a professional stand-up comedian. I podcaster as well, but sure, I mean, that goes with the territory with stand-up comedy at the minute. But I've been doing it a good while. But as far as stand-up comedy goes, I'm probably 14 and a half years doing it. Prior to that, I was a civil engineer. And yeah. I know most people go, what? And it was decent. It was a good setup, but one bite of the stand-up thing. And I mean, if people want to use their calculator, they can work back to 14 years ago. The downturn was coming worldwide.
Yes,
construction was starting to. The foundations were coming. Things were going sideways job wise anyway. And at the time, I'd neither chicken or child, so it was like, you know what? Let's give this a go. Let's give this stand-up thing a go. And yeah, through hook or by crook, this is where I've ended up. Thankfully, able to make a living from it now.
So, has stand-up always been something within you that you've always wanted to try, or something that was within the family before becoming a civil engineer?
Not in the least. We're blue-collar country folk. Just for farming people, and there wasn't really any performative. I mean, of course, you do school plays and stuff like that, but I always had a fascination with stand-up.
In what sense?
Do you know what it was? My parents had originally lived in the UK, and once upon a time, prior to me born, when you brought the aerial back home, or brought it anywhere around the UK or Ireland, when you brought the BBC aerial home, it worked in Ireland. So we had all the British channels. When you didn't get them, you couldn't get them here. So we had all the British channels. So I remember seeing one of the earliest ones was Jack D. He had a comedy club. It was a brilliant TV show. He launched Lee Evans on it, and it was a great show. It was like a bit of a cabaret show. There was music and stuff. He'd have Madness on and whatnot, and I just been fascinated. I was like, but again, I just thought this guy, like Billy Connolly, like all these famous comedians, I never considered where they came from. Like, I didn't consider where astronauts came from either. But when it was put in front of me, I was kind of dared by not dared, I was kind of tricked into it. And from there, then I was like, no, this is the worst idea ever to give this a go. But then I have a 5-year-old in the back of my brain poking me going, you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to do it. So, and that's, got tricked into going to a comedy club, and a week later I was on stage. At least they gave me a week. They gave me a week and get to at least build a couple of minutes worth of material. And that was the kickoff of it. But I thought it would come as a shock to my family, but they were like, no, that makes sense. Actually, that makes that makes sense. But in our family, it's when I look in at it now, especially around here, even comedy in in conversation is very much, it's almost like currency, you
Yes.
know? So where I've been in other parts of the world or even parts of Ireland, and they'll say things, almost misery is a currency, God, did you hear it's going to rain later today? Oh, go on, tell me more about the rain. Whereas here, not saying that they're a happier bunch of folks, but it seems to be a kind of a one-upmanship on trying to be the funnier of the two. And it could be just two farmers or anybody meeting. It tends to be somebody's always trying to drop in something funny. So I guess I'd maybe a natural penchant for a turn of phrase at least that I could fool people into thinking I was funny until I learned how to start writing jokes, at least for the first couple of years.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. You began by saying that your parents, they moved to England.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I was just
You were in,
I was just a bold thought. That's all I was,
you
Yinka,
were
at
in
the
a
time.
bold thought.
They had
Okay.
I had two sisters. They were born there, and they moved. I think they originally were in Glasgow, and then they were in Luton. Dad was a welder, and there was. I mean, it was late 1970s. There was not a lot happening in Ireland at the time in any form of work, and it just seemed like a good idea to pop over to the UK for a few years, make some money, and come back. It was always the intention to come back, but they came back with two girls, and I think I think I was conceived in Luton, all right, but I was born here in South Tipperary.
South Tipperary. And what was family like for you? What was it like growing up in South Tipperary?
It was very simple, and I only know that now from talking to my friends. It was a very simplistic setup. Um, you had to cycle to your friend. Do you know? You know what I mean? My best friend, lived probably 3/4 of a mile away. So I mean, there wasn't like, I guess we just cycled a lot. That's how it came about. But Dad worked like 16-hour days. I had two older sisters, a younger brother, and um, you made do with the things that would seem very uninteresting now. You know what I mean? You built things out of rocks and stuff, and it was
Absolutely.
ridiculously simplistic. But kids now, like looking now, it's like, God, how how would kids survive with the lack of interest in what I used to do? You know. But yeah, it was a good upbringing. It was People around here are tough people, physically very tough people.
Okay. Hardy.
Yeah, there's and it's only now it's even since I moved back, and I talk with people from other, I guess, local towns and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, you're from, oh yeah," and it seems to be like this known understanding that people from around here are extremely hardy people, just tough, no nonsense. You don't cross them. We don't need much of a police force visiting around these areas because not much trouble happens here, and if it did, it'd be very unfortunate for whoever was trying to cause trouble. If you know what I mean, it's just
Absolutely. Absolutely.
the area around here takes you
It
you
takes
take
a
care
look
of your
after
own.
itself. Yes.
Yeah, and at the
Yeah.
same time, you don't get overly bothered by. We're probably in a more grey area of the law around here than anything else because it's just as well not to bother. Things don't bubble over here too much.
Okay. What was school life like for you? What was school? Primary school, comprehensive school?
It's so interesting you asked that because my boy is now, who was born in Dublin, and we moved down, but he is now going to be going to my primary school, which is a rural primary school. In my head, we had the visit day because he's about to go in September, and we had the visit the other night. And in my head, I just had this bleak, horrible building, and pretty bleak. Uh, I didn't only think it back now it was bleak, but at the time I didn't think it was too bleak. But it was pea green walls, absolutely no pictures on the wall of anything. And still, what surprises a lot of my friends, it was the 80s, but corporal punishment was allowed. Um,
Yes.
yeah, I used to get a proper whooping. I mean, a proper whooping. But then, for some reason, it didn't really. I don't remember it affecting me. It obviously does. For if you're 5 years of age and you're taking a good old whipping with a stick.
Do you remember?
Yeah, yeah. But again, that uh, almost defiant caveman in my head was like, go again, you old bitch. Go on, go again. I dare you. And I'd hold out my other hand for another crack. Come on, you won't break me. And it was just, I don't know where that came from. Because even my parents telling them later, they're like, why would you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it was the showman in me because it was in front of the whole class. And they're like, maybe I would have cried, like, I don't know, if nobody else was there. But they, when the whole class is there, it's like, all right. And you stick out the other hand looking for a crack.
And what was so you were there till what? I'm assuming the age of 11, and then
11, then 11,
secondary
12. Yeah,
school.
12, and then I was into the local, I suppose, it was a technical school, where they're kind of prepping kids to be blue collar kids. There is the option of going on into university, which I did do, but you're kind of being prepped for the technical side of things. So there was woodworking and metalworking and stuff like that, where a lot of guys and girls kind of went on into, I suppose, more practical things without going to university. But it was a good school, but it was a good school. Our principal at the time, he wouldn't get away with the stuff he did back then, in a
Such as
very good in a very good way. In a very good way, he could read situations very well and nip it in the bud without having to go through a whole bunch of paperwork that you would have to nowadays. So,
okay.
for perfect example, I was 17. I bought a Mini. I don't know why, but for like 50 or 60 pounds. It was insane. Bought this Mini.
It was a good idea at the time.
It was a brilliant idea, Yinky. And I could fit all the boys in it. It was ludicrous. And we went around one. I was told not to bring it to school. I brought it to school anyway. And this one particular day, at lunchtime, a bunch of us jump in it. We go driving around the school. And two teachers on, they do security watch, we'll call it. But the way teachers will walk around, make sure nobody's smoking and stuff. And I round a corner and almost ran two of them down. Now, in my opinion, I had loads of space. And nothing much was said, but about a half an hour later, we're back in class. Bing bong. Could Tom O'Mahony please come to the principal's office, please? I'm like, oh, here we go. And up I go, and he was a big, strong man. And I walked in the door, and all I remember is closing the door, turning around, and then the next thing I remember was sitting on my ass on the seat, and just sparks in my eyes. He cracked me one right on the chin.
Wow.
Now he says, we're not going to talk to your parents about this. I'm not even going to write you up on this. And I couldn't do this to 99% of the students in here. But you know what you did. I went, Jesus Christ, did you have to split me one? But he was 100% right. He sussed the moment. He knew it, and I mean, he didn't light me up with a punch. This was a huge man. He could have taken my head clean off my shoulders. He just gave me one fast little jab on the chin. I said, no, that'll be the end of that. And he was 100% right, because he knew writing lines or doing detention was not going to sink in with me at all. He knew the animal he was dealing with, so he dealt with it in a split second. Now, back to class. I was like, Jesus, mind if I take a minute? Take as long as you need. We'll go back to class after that and we won't speak about it again. It was, I mean, it's hard, even as people listen to this, they're like, what, your principal punched you? That's when you write it down on paper, and if it came up in a court of law, yeah. But it kind of worked. It absolutely did work. And it was absolutely the right move for that time, for that person, for the situation, for the crime. It was dealt with. No parents needed to be brought into the situation. It would have only, the thing would have exploded up into something that it didn't need to be. He quenched that situation right there, and never again did that Mini come. In fact, I believe the Mini was sold about a week later. It was
lesson learned.
Lesson learned.
Indeed. So tell me about your folks then. You said your dad was a welder.
Yeah. He
was he present? Was he attentive? Is he still alive?
Yeah. Still on the go. They last long on his side of the family. My grandfather just passed away last year at 100. His father lived to like 97. Do you know one of these tough old goats that they just eat like 3 different meals in their life? That's it. No multivitamins, no keto diet. Yeah. They're not they're just these hardy old, wiry old blokes. And my old man is going the same way. You can see by him, he's still going. It's in his 70s, but was he was present? I mean, he was present at the weekends, but I mean, he just worked so much locally. It was local. He was working. He's a fitter in a factory nearby, but it was just, when there wasn't, it's hard for people to understand what Ireland was like in the 80s. It's not like it is now, where it's this economic hub, this huge software hub.
Celtic Tiger as was.
We went in 1994, 95, and I mean jumped light years from all of a sudden being this very primitive nation to a degree, to suddenly now all the universities full with science kids, and the major pharmaceuticals coming, all the major, so it was, prior to that, there wasn't a whole pile of money to be made. So when you got 4 kids and aspirations, I guess, for them to go to some sort of third level education, you got to work your ass off. Like, and that's what he did. So, I mean, he'd be there at the weekends or whatever. But I mean, he wasn't coming to any of my, any of my sports matches or anything like that. It just wasn't on the cards. Just, there wasn't a big lovey-dovey thing either. Like, we got to be there. That whole American thing hadn't really reached Ireland at the time. It was like, well, my dad didn't, so you'll be all right. But a good bloke and a hard-working bloke.
Okay. But what about you then in terms of parenting styles? Would you be different?
I think so. I definitely the softer edge. And it's
Why?
good because I've learned that a softer edge doesn't hurt at all. I was probably walking around, with barbed wire, in my head prior to meeting my wife, really. And she's just one of those good soul people. Very good person. A lot of things, she takes to heart, like a dead bird. That'll, break her for the day. I'm like, jeez, okay. But I've taken a bit of column A and column B, and I've tried to instill that on my son. Now, what I've noticed too is, without me even saying things, genetically, I do believe kids, they inherit certain traits of yours.
100%. Yes.
Like he will bust himself, as boys do. They absolutely bust themselves at 4 years of age. They run like rockets everywhere. And he's developed this thing where he'll just stand up and he'll just stare at whatever he hit off or whatever sharp toy he just stood on. He's just like, Jesus. He just takes a minute, and you'll see he's like a little old man. He like puts his hand on his hip like, okay, I need to deal with this pain right now. Ah, Christ. And like 2 or 3 of his friends, they will cry the house down. You're like, okay, one is probably, I don't know which one is healthier. I never told him to do that. I'm like, man, if you that thing is ripping a pain in your foot, you cry it out. But for somewhere, he's after, this is his method in doing it. But I do like a lot of positive affirmation, because no harm. Do you know what I mean? But also at the same time, he steps out of line, he absolutely gets told it. We will toe the line. Like, there's no if, ands, and buts when it comes to discipline, because at least when discipline and timelines, like bedtime, never changes. There is never changes. He will, like, he's in bed now, and you know what I mean. And his friends, like,
that's just gone 7 now, yeah.
And it's little things like that. There is no backward step if we say something. There's no backward step. Also, if we promise something, there won't be a backward step. Sorry, I didn't. No, hell and high water will have to move to make it happen if you made a promise. So at least early doors, because we probably only have his brain till he's about 7, until he starts really, you know what I mean? Until he's now, all of a sudden, we're not cool anymore. And so I think early doors, at least if we can get that into him, whereas, look, stand by your word, be a good bloke as best you can be. And bedtime is when bedtime is, Yinka. There's no, and in fairness, it's great. It's great because it's just like, all right, bed, fine, off I go. It's just drilled into him now. There is no, come on, nothing. I say that now, but watch, next week, he'll probably start into a phase where he's like, no.
Probably listening in.
Yeah, I know.
I was going to ask, the example that you gave about the mini, bringing it into school, and your head teacher just giving you that slight jab. If your father had found out, would he have disciplined you?
I'd say, yeah. No, he wasn't the whooping sort. There was always the threat of it. All right. I think as dad, and I asked him since, I was like, but you never really did. You never laid into it. He goes, well, your mother's a terrifying person as it is, and she had a wooden spoon, so she probably laid a lot of the groundwork before I got home. Irish mothers are notorious. They will light you up. That's, at least for my era anyway. They would and then my friends and neighbors' mothers had the same. It was like they were all in the one coven. They all had the same. They all had the same right. So if I was acting,
bubble, toil and trouble. Yes,
I'm telling you, if I had acted the same dick like over at my friend's house, his mother wouldn't have to ring my mother to go, hey, he's being a bit of a knob. Can I discipline him? That phone call did not have to happen. Do you know, she would act on it inappropriately in the moment. And if I went home to say, Bobby's mum, she hit me. Why'd she hit you? Well, I was climbing on top of the house and I shouldn't have really. Yeah, well, there you go. There you go. This is going no further. Get it together.
Yeah. Did you have to vie for your mum's affections growing up, being what I'm assuming you were the youngest?
I was the middle child.
Of how many?
4.
Four.
Well, I guess middle, there was 2 of us in the middle. So there was the 2 girls that were quite close. They were like 14 months in the difference. And then there was me 3 years later. And then my brother 3 more years after that. Yeah, I suppose I did. The only thing I will say is that nobody's mother gave him affection. You know what I mean? So at least when I'd look at that, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's how it happens over there. It's pretty much the same way as that. Because I mean, they certainly. I didn't fully appreciate that people were affectionate towards each other, really and truly, until I met my wife. I was like, geez, wow. She's from a nice part of Dublin, and these people are very nice to each other as family members. They hug and tell each other they love each other as kids. I'm like, Jesus, I don't think. And honestly, when I say it out loud and I talk about this on stage, like, I don't think I ever got a hug off one of my parents. I did at my wedding, off either one of my parents at my wedding, but it's like more of a handshake kind of thing, kind of an understanding. But when I put it to other people, it's not an oddity. It's, I don't know, it's an Irish thing or an Irish rural thing, but it's like you just get a nod and a wink if you're doing well. Good man. That's good man. That's all you need, really. So the hugging thing, it's only making its way into, say, my son's generation now, where it's, let's hug. But even still, every so often, he'll kind of shrug me off like, jeez, tone it down.
You know what? It's interesting because that's on a few comedians that I've interviewed, that I've spoke with. They've all said the same thing.
Right.
Of a generation, showing affection was not something that was done, was not something that was expected. And they only truly experienced it once they entered into relationships themselves.
Yeah, well, there you go. There. I suppose, and I asked my wife about it, and we were like, yeah, we were hugged. And I said, do you think it made much of a difference? She doesn't see, I guess, I guess it is, it can be, the fact that we were fed, I suppose, you know what I mean? There was never any ill feeling. I never felt that you were in the way or anything like that. Again, talking with my friends, quite lucky we'd space, physical, actual space. You know, there was places to go and stuff to do to keep out of each other's way. So you just saw each other enough that it was, you weren't over egging the pudding by continuously being all in the one small terrace house together and literally vying for your mother's attention. You pretty much got it when you were up, because chances are the other 3 were out doing something else. You know what I mean? So it was almost like a timeshare, you know. So it actually worked out all right. Like.
And your relationship with your siblings, what's that like? I mean, so for some, again, I've interviewed, some have said that they're close, others have said that they've been distanced because of the size of the family.
I suppose it's not, we were with the 2 girls, probably my 2 older sisters, because they were kind of guardians, whatnot. And with my younger brother, we were good up until maybe, I guess we just moved to separate places. I was in Dublin and stuff. He was down here and just went into different work, and just, he got a very lifestyle with his kids and stuff. And so we probably grew apart unintentionally to a degree, you know. It wasn't a set thing that we're separate ways now, and that's that. But we did. I don't really know why. I suppose it comes down to maybe his relationships and stuff that he's busy with, and he's got a bunch of kids and stuff, which I completely appreciate. And when we do see each other, it's cordial. But I don't put too much weight on it either, because I understand that people have lives. I don't go, why aren't you there for me every moment? Yeah, man, I gotta my car needs 4 new tires, or I'm gonna fail the MOT tomorrow. I got to do, man. Come on,
Did you ever tell them that you love them? Do you ever tell your sisters that you love them?
I doubt. I would doubt it. I doubt.
Okay. Or is it just something that's
Yeah.
understood and not voiced?
I would think so. I would say, yeah, I'd say it's understood and not voiced. One of my like both my sisters are very progressive people, in that they're in the sciences. You know, they're both very, very accomplished and stuff. So they'll say it every so often, you know, things like, ugh, and they get quite excited at big shows that I've done and stuff. And I think they're just caught up in the moment. Whereas, you know, there has to be ice in your veins when you're the one on stage and whatnot. So afterwards, it's like, okay, all right, almost like my son. It's like, Tony, Jesus Christ, I mean, Jesus, you know, we're still country people. We don't have to, you know, we don't have to go too far. It's okay.
Is that a persona that needs to be maintained, though, particularly from a male perspective?
I think,
Is it difficult?
yeah,
Is it difficult to show your emotions?
uh, it's getting me. I want fashionable is probably the wrong word, but it's certainly getting more and more acceptable, but in a very unique way. I know I had a guy up at the house build. I was telling you we're building a house at the minute, and we're self building. And I say self building. I'm not the one building. It's these very professional people are coming up as trades and whatnot. But a chap up the other day, and I know that he's just splitting up with his missus. I don't want to ask him too much, you know, but I've known him a long time. Like, but he just started telling me about going to therapy, and I was like, right, okay. Well, I talk to a lot of people, and I've met a lot of odds because I think he was ready to talk to me. Because if you talk to most of his friends, like, I don't know why you're Jesus, man. I don't. Why are you loading me with this stuff? You know, I can't. Oh, Christ, did you see the game at the weekend? Can we just talk about the game? You know, where I felt when he was when he started telling me about therapy and the misses and stuff like that and all the rest, I went, oh, I think this is his only outlet, right? Let's get going. But I kind of left it in there also every so often to say, hey, by the way, you know, I'm not a professional to be talking to, but I'm glad to be talking about this if it's, you know, not
Okay.
because I'm a nosy bastard. I want to
No,
help you to make this more normal, you
absolutely.
know.
But he must have seen you. He must have felt you were a safe person, a safe space to open up to.
I think he definitely would because for wrong or for right, when you're on stage, you do talk about personal things for you know, it's for it's the use of humor. You do talk about personal things that people would never normally open up about. You know, just well, you know, things people would keep to themselves. So I suppose I'd opened that gate long ago in his mind, going, this fella, he's got no shame barrier. Like he is open to anything being said. So he just started unloading. I was like, now not in a to give him his due, in still a very tough man way. He's a very, very tough man, the same guy. He didn't, you know, suddenly turn into a complete blank. Like he was still leaning against the car, smoking a cigarette like this, going, Jesus Christ, you know what I mean? It's just like,
Like the Marlboro Man, yes.
yeah. So, but it was. I do think it's getting more and more. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't dare suggest that it's me being. I'm the one that guys seem to come to, but I've noticed that it's becoming very acceptable and almost a sign of toughness now. If you're even a harder bloke, if you can talk about your emotions, you know what I mean? Because it's quite a tough thing, is the pressures of being a bloke. You know, you're like, well, I'm that tough. I can even talk about my emotions, which is a great 180 from a couple of years back. You know,
100%. 100%. So tell me a bit about your act then. What does it entail? What's not off the table, as it were? You can talk about anything. You can talk about mental health. You can talk about suicide. You can talk about
yeah. I mean, there's I don't I think there's humor to be found in anything if you're coming from the right place. That's kind of what I've discovered in, especially it's very, very interesting. Opened a comedy club quite close by, which would have never had comedy before. Now, all of a sudden, year and a half later, we have people who are regular comedy goers. But what they love is the mental shut off. So the doors close, and for 2 hours, you ain't thinking about the mortgage, you ain't thinking about rent, you're not thinking about your sore foot, you know what I mean? You get to shut off. And I found myself leaning into that a small bit. And I remember last week, I was just talking to a guy in the front row, and it's a bit of a roast. I roast myself, we roast each other, and you
yeah.
know, before I bring the act on. And I was talking with a guy, and I said, "What do you do?" And he looked at the ground and he went, "I don't know." I said, "Well, do you work?" And he went, yeah, I work, yeah. But I said, what do you do? He said, I just work in a shop. I said, don't you fucking dare. Don't you dare. Man, you do a day's work. And I said, I will never, I said, never take a backward step on the fact you get up in the morning and go to work. That's not a hope.
Absolutely.
I said, what kind of shop do you in? I said, I work in a deli. I said, Jesus Christ, I've been made happier by more people making me sandwiches than I've ever met a high professional that's made me happy. I said, Christ almighty. I said, you pull into a petrol station as a comic at, 10 o'clock at night and the person is still working in the deli. You're the greatest person on earth. And you could see the guy kind of like, I suppose,
His chest.
the social.
Yeah.
Yeah, he puffed up. He was like, and I got like everybody jumped in and gave him a round of applause. Everybody was like, yeah, you're dead right. Why should you, shame-wise take a backward step on what you do for a living? Who cares? Do you know what I mean? Especially if you're doing an honest day's work. You should stand proud on that. Now, it's saying that we had a good old battle back and forth, because just for humor's sake afterwards. But you could see he kind of he changed his whole persona, and he came up to me afterwards. He said, you didn't have to say that. I said, no, I did. It did have to be said. I didn't say it for props or for the audience's attention. I was saying that for you and for anybody who's listening. Don't you dare take it backward. Don't you dare backwards on this. I know, I says, you're looking at Instagram every second day and some bloke is asking you what color Bugatti. I said, but that's bullshit. I said, the real world is a bloke who pulls up his trousers in the morning, gets out to work, just earn a living, like, and it's doing his best. I said, don't you dare. Nah, no way, man. Not a hope. And you could see the guy was like, yeah, you know what? Yeah. He was, whether I hit him with only 1% of confidence, the guy walked away with, standing a bit taller anyway for the rest of the evening. Like,
absolutely. Talk to me a little bit about your own mental health in the past. Have you struggled yourself?
Oh, yeah. I remember it was lucky. And you know what? There's nearly a blind spots where you go, oh, well, what year was that? Oh, that was the year, right. And it was in correlation, and I think a lot of guys talking with it, and it doesn't really come up that often. I guess for whatever reason it must have reared its head, but it was during the construction downturn. And I think it was because we were so spoiled for a certain length of time. Like it was crazy. It's crazy, but because it was my first run at construction or whatever, and I just assumed that this had been it all the time, where, everything is rosy, everything is great, and all of a sudden downturn starts happening, and these pressures that are being put on somebody who I was getting work that I wasn't ready for at all, especially in civil engineering, because they were just trying to rush everything finished, get everything ready, or get everything pumped out, and and it came to a point where I remember I lost the house, lost the business, because I'd started my own land surveying business, everything, and it just all went away. Just a whole lot went away in the space of like 2 or 3 months. And I was very lucky. My parents were like, they kind of spotted it, which I didn't. They were like, you need to move back home. You need to move back home together. And the only thing I had that stayed a constant was I had started stand-up. Now I was still only doing open mics and things like that. But I had no idea what direction I was in. And this is only really kind of, I had to stitch all this together. I'd wipe this from my memory. I was like, that year and a half where I just had no direction, no idea what to do. I'd wiped it. That didn't happen. Or there was a jump. I just went, well, obviously I must have stayed at home for a month. No, you stayed at home for a year and a half. That's what you did. But
that feels kind of traumatic then, that period of time.
Oh, absolutely. You're sinking. I guess you're drowning because you don't know what direction is next. And only because you could say, well, if it hadn't been going so well, then you would, maybe that is the case, that because things have been going so well. And I knew other guys that were now talking in the same position. Things were going so well. Like jobs, you were literally getting job offers 3 days a week while in a job. You're like, Jesus Christ, I wish I could take all these, And yeah, there was this period where but I was, like I said, very lucky. And even the old man was like, look, you can come working with me, or you can try and get it together and make a go of this comedy thing. And I remember him saying it, and I went, yeah, I guess the smarter thing would probably to come working with you. He says, it would be, but If the dream is the dream, then you should stick with it. And I was lucky that he had the foresight to be able to say that to me, because it wouldn't have been out of place for him to go, all right, up off your arse, come on, we're going to work. Do you know, rather than me going out 5 nights a week, you know, driving, because I was back in the countryside, driving, you know, 100 miles a night to go and do open mics for next to no money, which didn't make any sense. But he understood that I needed that, because it would have been, you know, because you would have had to give up one further, really, if I went working in the factory with him. And he understood that, look, give it a go. Give it a go. You're going to be all right. And that was what I needed. That was it. Started working out in the gym again. Comedy started. I started to feel like I was a comedian to a degree, and at least what I was at the back, and reassurance, I suppose, from my parents. Not reassurance, but they valued it. So at least there wasn't a, oh, he's off to do that. Oh, shite. You know, how was the gig? Was it good? You know, they would know, so they legitimized what I was doing to a degree.
Yeah.
So at least that pointed me in the right direction. And I think what it ended up doing, trauma, I guess in one way can be, you should try and look for the positive, same way you should try and look for the funny, but I should try and look for the funny because that's my job. But also in trauma, I think you should try and look for the positive. Do you know, it's almost like the doctor's phrase, don't be sad it's over, be sad that it happened. Like, try and look back. And I describe this as almost developing cauliflower brain to a degree, where you make yourself tough. You make yourself tough as a result of that trauma. You're like, well, if I was in that position before, I can get through that. I'm pretty much sure I can get through anything, you know. So you fight on as a result of that, I believe. Anyway, I think that's kind of what helped me. When you've been through a dark period, you're like, all right, you know, it's almost like building a new muscle memory, where you've broken a wall down. And you said, well, I got through that moment, that period of hell.
I mean, some people will call that post-traumatic growth. The ability to be able to
great phrase,
bounce back, you know, from adversity in of itself. And I'm not going to hold back on this. You said it was a year and a half. You were there with your family, etc. Your mental health, in what ways did that struggle?
I guess not really understanding anything about mental health at the time, but thankfully my parents were there. That's the only thing I'd say that was keeping it between the hedges for me. I was able to go back to being 15, 16 years of age again. Only enough was being asked of me, because they understood that I was at breaking point when they took me back in. So they only asked for a little. They weren't asking for the 26, 27-year-old me. They were more or less only asking enough of what was the 15, 16-year-old me. So they allowed me to, I suppose, regrow. But looking back on it now, at the time, I guess at the time you don't realize you're suffering a lot of the time, because you've nobody to tell you. There's no expert, you know, looking in over the hedge and going, I see you there. You look yourself, you know, nobody, all you could do was persevere. But looking back now, for sure, absolute sleepless nights. You know, you're just considering. My big thing was considering running away from it all, and that was heading off to.
Sorry, say that again, please. Your big thing was.
Yeah, I consider you just want to run away from it all and go, because there's a bit of a shame in it, you know. So you know what? I'll just move to Germany. I'll move where nobody knows me, and it'll be fine, and we can just sweep this all under the carpet. Because there is a shame to, 1 minute, you know, you're driving around in a Range Rover. The next, you're back to the fucking 50 Mini again. You know, all of a sudden you're, Jesus Christ, how did that happen? But what comedy also did for me, I saw a currency in being able to tell your shite stories. You're kind of going, can you believe that shit happened to me? And all of a sudden you're meeting other people going, Jesus, a very similar thing happened to me. No. So it rests with people. At least I was in a place where I was able to talk about it out loud and kind of point
Yeah.
out, going, "Oh, fucking hell. You know, heated seats. I was used to heated seats. I owned 2 tuxedos, for Christ's sake, you know." So
Was there
in
ever,
that sense, it was. Hmm?
was there ever a time you contemplated suicide?
Yeah, I'd say there was. I think being an engineer, I think my brain went about it a different way. Where I was never at the point where I was on the bridge or had the pills or whatever. But I probably broke it down into going, am I in that position? What are the out? What have I got to? What would I have to do? Where would I have to be for that to be the last result? Of. And I had calculated, thankfully, that I wasn't there yet. Thankfully, that I wasn't there yet. But
How did you do,
I
how
kind of
did you
laid it
do that?
pointed. Well, I literally ran with what were the important things, and at the time, it was my family, my parents, even down to minor things like dog. You know what I mean? The things that make me smile. You know, the fact that I had still all my 10 fingers and toes. I was still walking around healthy.
9.
You know
Oh,
what I mean?
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Well, we're down to 9 at the minute. This busted finger. So but I literally did that. Like looked around the room, kind of went, I have, you know, I got a decent pair of shoes there. That's pretty good. All right, we'll write that down, because I'd nothing else to be doing that day, you know. So I just had to list out everything. Go, you know what? It's shitter than it was, but it could be way shitter than it is. It's okay. It's all right. You know. And that I know it wasn't putting. I'm not trying to put value on material things, but in that moment, it was just, the dog all of a sudden doesn't give a shit if you what's in your pocket. You know what I mean? The dog is just going,
Absolutely.
you are a legend. I love everything about you. And you're like, yeah, nice one, dog. And your parents are the same way. They don't care what's in your pocket. They shouldn't care what's in your pocket. They should just go, you're still a good egg. You're still a good egg.
Yeah.
Good man.
Yeah.
You having a cup of tea? Yeah. And you just all you can do. All I could do was take it every day, little bites. Every single day was a little bite. You know, that kind of way. Because if you try and think of it over a whole spectrum of, this is my 6-month plan of getting better. Personally, I can't wrap my head around, more than 24 hours in advance what's these scenarios. So in that particular time, yeah, it was literally day by day. When you have a little win like that, I got a little TV show thing. Oh my God, you celebrate it, which is something I'd
Yeah.
never done before. You're like, right, on to the next thing. That's fine. Of course I got that, because, I'm great. And then you're on to the next thing then. But when I started to get these little wins, yeah, all right, this might be
When
working.
you
This might be working.
when you look back at that time, it feels like you were self-sufficient and that you were able to pull yourself out of the hole.
Yeah.
Did you tell
Yeah.
Did you tell anybody about how you were feeling? How close things
No.
came? How desperate you were?
No. I didn't think
Why?
it was.
Can I ask why not?
I suppose on 2 counts, it was the manly thing as well at the time. You're like,
Because you used the
bite
word shame before.
Yeah, it's the shame thing. It's like, oh, Jesus Christ, that's you know what I mean. Even the lady in your life shouldn't be shared. You're just. I always had, this thing just dropped you from physical sport and stuff like that, and just bite down your gum shield and get after it. That kind of thing. Like, this is, you got to sort your own shit. Pull up your fucking boots and get after it. Which is the only men I'd ever met were those kind of men. I'd never met anybody before who had ever sought help or need. I swear to God, when I started hanging around with some of my friends that I met in Dublin, I would not believe these guys couldn't service their own car. I couldn't believe this. You go, Jesus, what do you mean? I just couldn't. I said, what do you mean? You just, what? You ring a man, do you? Like, what did you do? Oh no, you had to be the man, because the man that you're talking about lived 10 miles away, and he might not get to you till next Tuesday. You had to sort everything yourself. You had to be able to weld, wire a house, fix your car. You know what I mean? It was, I guess it was just necessity, and you didn't feel sorry for yourself. You just kind of, well, there's no other choice. You just have to sort. So I think maybe to a degree that probably fed into it. Whereas like I don't see another option here, nor was I looking for one. I was just like, well, you have to go sort, because that was just always in my head, and it wasn't drummed into my parents. If you met any of the men around here, they're all the same way. Oh,
Yeah.
you sorted that yourself, because you've been around waiting for, like, people where we're building the house at the minute. Just to give you an example, everybody thinks the county council, the local council, built the road that came into us, like 600 yards of a road. I'd be waiting for 2 years if that was going to happen. I just went and built the thing myself. And people are like, "What?
Yes.
You just?" I'm like, "Yeah, because I need to get my car in there, and trades need to get in there with their vans, and what?"
Absolutely.
You're like, "Just get out, just sort it. Trust me, just sort it. You'll be absolutely fine." And I've always kind of had that trigger pull thing where I should probably maybe think about things more prior to jumping, that kind of way. I say that, but I wouldn't be doing stand up if that was my mentality. But I'm probably getting better at marginally looking at things and thinking a bit more. But I've always had that kind of, well, if the instinct feels right, then it's probably best to do it, in
Trust your
positive
gut.
ways,
Trust your
obviously.
gut. How was
Yeah,
then
yeah.
moving? How was moving to Dublin then? That must have been a bit of a culture shock.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I'd been in another city prior to moving back home. I'd been in Cork, which is about half the size. So, but
Cork.
it was an absolute culture. It was an absolute culture shock in that it's a proper city. You know what I mean? There's diverse ranges of people all over, but it was um, it was a very soft landing, because where I, by pure fluke, met another comic, none of us had any money. It was great. I was almost like reliving student times. Weirdly, I was
Okay.
like, okay, so there's no one-upmanship here, and there was like 6 of us living in the house. Do you know, there was one crazy guy from Iceland, there was one biker woman, and there was another, and it was actually the perfect place to land first as an intro to moving into city life, because nobody was trying to outdo each other financially, because we're all like, oh, right, we have no money at all. So it was acceptable to just be doing whatever you want to do, and nobody cared whether you were, what you did for a living. So and I think it was a good to have a fresh start in a way, and to kind of recalibrate and reset the system. It's like, all right, okay, we can get going from here, do you know? Because at least I found myself falling in with kind of like-minded people, i.e., in comedy. We're like, oh, we're all in the one boat together, so this is comforting. And from there, then you start setting your goals and to, I guess, your aspirations. And a lot of the guys that I was pals with at the time didn't continue with comedy or whatever. They just went off and did other things. For me, I had locked onto it like a dog. I was like, no, I ain't letting this thing go. This is too much fun, and I'm kind of good at it. I think I'm kind of good at it. I'm not terrible at it anyway. So at least
Mm.
I could go
I
from
think,
there.
I think I think you're a bit more than kind of good at it.
Well, yeah. Well, we've gotten ourselves to a point now where we can actually pay the bills. So that's, and nobody's hungry in the house. So that's a great thing.
Tick.
Yeah, yeah. Take.
Just going back, because we are looking at mental health and that. On your journeys, on your career, have you lost anybody to
Yeah,
suicide?
yeah. I don't know if we just did a benefit the other night. It was weird. If you can see that picture behind me, it's over
Yes.
yeah, that's a chap called Billy Anderson, and he very poignant man in my life. He was the comic who was running the club that gave me my first ever gig. American guy, and a real student of comedy. Like, I was blessed to have actually met him first, because he gave me direction and he was giving me pointers and CDs of comics that he was like, I think you should listen to this guy. And he was great, because they really take it seriously in a place in America like New York and Atlanta and stuff,
Yeah.
where there's a real academy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not as
Yeah.
scatterbrained as Ireland and the UK. There's a real direction for it. But yeah, he helped me the first 3 years anyway to definitely get me in, and he convinced me to move to Dublin. And yeah, and then maybe, was it 2 years ago? 2 years ago, 3 years ago now. Sorry, 3 years ago, he was in a great place in his life. He had previously broken up with the wife or whatever, but he was with a new woman. Great. He was actually coaching an American football team, and on the way to one of their games, crashed, got killed. And we do a benefit now every year for his kid. His kid's only like 10, 11. So at least we do, a couple of us comedians come together, we put on a night, and just to raise money to put into an account for the kid. You know what I mean? For when he hits 18 or whatever. But I remember it was a friend of mine that rang me. It was a mutual friend, great friend, Gordo Rochford of those Conspiracy Guys podcast. And he rang me and he said, "Are you driving us?" Yeah, I said, "But you're on loudspeaker, it's fine. It's through the car system." He said, "Might pull over there for a second." I went, "Okay, right." And he says, Billy's after dying. I said, "Which bit? What? What do you mean Billy's after dying?" He says, "Billy Anderson crashed the car this morning. He's dead. Are you all right?" And there's a very strange thing that sometimes happens to me in scenarios like that, because Gordo couldn't understand it at all. We spoke at the funeral, and in that moment, I go into mission mode. I go into, right, how can I mitigate the damage here for everybody else? Right, what do we do? Okay, so 'cause I just wasn't computing it at all. He thought I was going to go into floods of tears on the spot. And has never been my system. It's, we'll save the tears for a minute, for a couple hours later. Right now, what can we do now to mitigate this? I was like, okay, 10-4, kind of a, 10-4. All right, roger that. I shall put that in the bank. Let me know if there's anything I can do. He's like, all right, Tom. Okay. I got real robotic. And how can we help whoever needs helping in the scenario? What do you need done? Does the car, is it, does Billy's family, are they okay? You just let me know. And he was like, "Oh, Jesus, all right, okay." And it wasn't until like later on that night where I'm at home and I'm like, "Oh my God." And I just break into floods of tears. It took me like 5 hours for it to hit me. We're like, God, and it was only then I rang Gordo, and he was like, "I was wondering when." My God, Tom. I was like, but he said, in fairness, you were very helpful on the phone. I've never seen that from somebody. You were like, he said, "Does somebody need to be driven somewhere? Do you need?" But he says, "You were completely," he says, "you sounded like," I don't know what, he says, "you had no emotion in that moment, bar you wanted to help. How did you contain it?" I says, "Oh, I don't know. I have no idea how I contained that." I said, to be honest, by the time I got home and later on, and I ate my dinner. I felt bad having to break it to my wife because she loved him too. But I was like, well, poor old Bill. Oh my, and it just hit me like a sledge. Just like a sledgehammer to the chest later on that night, just sitting in the sitting room by myself, the lounge or living room by myself. And even I had to think about myself going, why did it take so long? What was that? I don't know. I don't have an answer for it. I definitely did feel emotion heavily as much more delayed. But for some reason, I went into, I call it mission mode. And that often happens like in panic situations. And I don't know where I learned that from, because my parents are terrible in panicky situations. Terrible. I don't know. Maybe construction days where everything is at 2,000 miles an hour. There's people shouting at each other back and forth. Maybe there's an inner calm for one half an hour, just like, all right, whoa. Let's get this back on track for a sec. Maybe, I don't know. But that has kind of always been my way, rather than absolutely flying off the handle and running around like my hair's on fire in that moment. And my hair would be on fire a couple hours later when I think about it, though, at home over a cup of tea. But yeah, Billy made like one of the biggest, and it was a wonderful thing to see the way there was benefits went on. There was comedians who didn't even know the guy. It was great to see they put him on in Belfast, and his friends flew in from America and stuff. And I don't think they had grasped how much he was loved here in Ireland. Yeah, oh my God. See, even the third year running, sold out show, and they're going for an even bigger show next year, because it's just the right thing to do. His ex-wife is raising the kid at home by good woman. She's raising the kid at home by herself. So if we can help in any which way, we put on this benefit, and if it puts away a couple of quid for him, if he ever wants to go to university or whatever, I don't even know what he's doing. He could be spending on games for all I care. But the main thing is, at least we can help in some which way. But yeah, he would be the main man to lose during my career anyway. and had one of the biggest effects on it.
When the floodgates, you said it was 5 hours afterwards that the floodgates opened for yourself, that it dawned on you. What did you need at that time?
Oh, I needed to be alone. I needed to be alone. Because it's an interesting thing. Maybe if it was a different friend, but there's something about stand-up comedy where you are quite alone anyway, and you take, I suppose, comfort in solitude because you're alone on stage. You're not hiding behind a band. You've got nothing but you. So I think in that moment, it would have been only right, to be by myself, just in that. The following day, myself and my wife had a proper cry together, but she understood. She was like, yeah, I just went for a walk in the garden. Just, you're just kicking over stuff, kind of going, cripes, why did you? But you're adult. I was adult, it was late enough in life where I was an adult enough to do it. Anybody could spin off the road. It's a thing that happens, and also probably driving quickly to get to the game and stuff like that or whatever. But it was, that's all I needed in that moment was just for me to then compute it and go, all right, okay. And I just wanted to think about Billy, and what a good egg he was. Just wanted a real good eggs, real good bloke. I guess, and I talked openly then with my wife and my friends, and at the funeral too. And it was good. It was good. We all got to laugh, and we went for a drink afterwards, just telling some of his jokes and stuff. That was great that there was actually, he had a catalogue of jokes that we could all tell to each other. So at least it was a good way of honoring his memory and stuff. But yeah, that was how I dealt with that. I wouldn't change. I wouldn't change it in any way. It was for me, it was the perfect way because it's what Billy would have done too. The other way, the shoe was on the other foot. He wouldn't have made, a song and dance in that moment. He would have just wanted to be alone,
Thank you for sharing. I'm thinking as well, I haven't spoken to quite a few comedians on the podcast. And you alluded to it in terms of being on stage and that the solitariness of being a comedian. How do you manage going from gig to gig, spending time in hotel rooms, etc., etc.? Does your wife go with you? Does your wife go with you, or I'm assuming that she doesn't?
She doesn't. No, she doesn't. What you find yourself doing, and I was gigging with a very good friend the other night. The two of us are together on the one show. She's a great comic, and she was just talking about exactly that. She goes, "Geez, you'd miss people, wouldn't you? Sometimes." I said, "I know, but it's the job, isn't it?" She goes, "I know it's the job." She goes, "Do you ring everybody when you're driving? Or when you get anywhere, you just ring another comic?" Like, oh yeah, absolutely. That's all you can do, because it's not that you're like ringing another war hero or whatever, but you're ringing somebody else who's probably in another hotel room somewhere else and going, "Did you hear?" Or, "Here's a shithole," or it's like you can trade war stories at least, and that's what you find. Like, there's nothing better. There's nothing better than a green room full of comics or a car full of comics driving to a thing, because the irreverent shit that's said, you couldn't let normal folk listen to it. They'll go, "These people need help." You can't speak about things like, there's nothing. When you're good friends, there should be nothing off limits. Like, I mean, nothing off limits. You know what I mean? So you're just ripping each other. So that also too, you're hyped up by the time you get to stage. You're like, well, we've set the engine going. Let's
do
go.
it.
Yeah, let's go.
And your wife, she's been, I'm assuming, your biggest supporter outside of your family, your mum and dad, of your career, etc.
I can tell you without a shadow of doubt, it would be. Well, I may have just packed it in. You know what I mean? I definitely wouldn't have hit. I would not have hit the successes that I've had it. I mean, good. You only get better because you try harder. You're not naturally born better at whatever trade you take up. But, and she wouldn't be a pushy sort or anything like that. But she'd make you believe, that kind of way, that, oh yeah, you can absolutely. There was like anything I've ever mentioned to her. I want to play in front of 10,000 people in the 3 Arena. Yep, that's going to happen. Of course it's going to happen. You know what I mean? Never, and not a flicker in her eye. She's looking at you like, yeah, that's going to happen. Oh, 100%. Never. I remember when I got that first TV thing I was telling you about, and I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, no idea. I don't know how I got it. I was like, I'm not from where the character's accent was from or anything. I was playing a real posh Dublin guy, and I didn't know how to learn script. You know, and this is how you know sometimes there'll be telltale signs when you're onto a winner. You know what I mean? And when i.e., maybe your partner in life, when they do things, and we understood that I didn't know how to learn, make a script stay in my head. I don't know how to make a script stay in my head. I haven't written this, so this doesn't sound like me. How do I? And she, because she's a very good artist, she's really good at drawing. We would pick out highlight words in it. So say Tom and Yinka were talking about horse racing. That line then would have a picture of a horse beside it. I go, right, the horse racing one. And we dotted those around the house. And without everywhere. They were in the toilet, bathroom, they were everywhere. These parts of the script that were rewritten. But what you would do for that, it would log in my memory, because that I had to make it really simplistic. Would be the horse, would be a key, would be whatever. And you're like, she came up with that for me, because she was like, you gotta do something. There was no like, well, I don't know what I'm gonna do for you. She was 1,000,000% gone. And I'm thinking, going, what am I doing? All these people are actually actors. But I was laughing because, well, they cast me in it, so it must be all right. But from in my head, I probably didn't value it enough. Also, because I just thought it was so silly. It was like, they're going to find out when I end up on television that I don't know what I'm doing. But at least I'll have the words. And she made sure, with things like that, where are you going to find, a partner who's going to draw the script for you around and put it everywhere around the house so that, it just sticks into your head.
That's it. I'm just pausing, reflecting on what we spoke about here. You've shared quite a bit about yourself, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, it's been great.
I'm gonna ask. I like to digress, etc. But what does love mean to you? A nice little curveball.
Love. I guess it's like in that moment, as an example, she drew those things up for me without thinking about it. And I think love, it can't be forced. You can't be told to love somebody. It has to be in you. Like there is no end to what I would do for my wife and my child. There's nothing. Like and it's not that I'd have to go, well, nah, nothing. And it doesn't, to say it out loud, doesn't put an ounce of weight on my shoulders. Nothing. If I have to go like my old man and put in 17, 18 hours days working in a factory just to keep them fed, not a question. And I wouldn't whinge. Do you know what I mean? There's just not a care in the world what I have, so long as they don't have a care in the world. Do you know what I mean? The main thing is, for me, love, I guess, is, without having to think about it, without having to put an effort in. If you're finding yourself having to put an effort into what you should be loving, chances are you don't love it. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yinka, that was an absolutely horrible question to ask me right at the end. I'm like, God almighty, I feel like, where's Wikipedia for this kind of stuff? That's. But you're right to ask it. You are right to ask it, because I suppose you don't, for recognizing these things. I mean, and sometimes it's easier to plow on throughout life without ever having to recognize and go, do I? Of course I do. But like I say it every night to my boy going to bed. I love you. He's like, yeah, I love you. I'm like, cool.
No, but but I know what you're saying there. I know exactly what you're saying.
I want him off to bed with that in his head. Even if he didn't even hear it properly, it's in there somewhere going, the old man absolutely thinks on the bee's knees. He absolutely loves me. Do you know what I mean? So he doesn't, if he's asked the question, do you think your dad loves you? He doesn't go, he told me last night, so I'm thinking, it's just in him. It's like in his core, in his veins, everything going, yeah, 100%, without even thinking about it. So yeah, it's actually a good broad question to throw out there, isn't it?
It is. It's an important question. What next for you? What's in the pipeline for you moving forward?
Next, get this house finished. It's not far off. It's not far off, thankfully. Although people say, like, thankfully, I'm in a very lucky position that I put in all the hard work years ago, that this is not stressful at all for me. People say building houses and buying is the most stressful. It's not actually at all. So getting this wrapped up, then we have, I filmed my comedy special earlier in the year and releasing that. That'll be released in October. Going to release it free on YouTube, not putting ads or anything on it. It worked well last year. Sold a lot of tickets to this current, to the show that happened this year. And yeah, back on the road with a brand new show, February, March next year.
Okay, are you going to be, is this just in Ireland or are you going to be in the UK?
No, there's definitely going to be UK dates as well. Yeah, for sure. I think Liverpool, Manchester and London.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, we'll definitely see each other.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Front row, Yinka. Front
row.
No,
I'm not getting roasted by you. No fucking way, mate. No way. I'm at the back. I'll be at the back heckling. Okay. Tom, final question. Who's the most important person in your life?
My boy.
Wrong.
Okay. Yeah. Valid point. Jeez, man. Jeez, man. Okay. Do you know what that was? That was the Irish person in me who has to stay humble. Irish people are terrible. That's almost like pain. I'm very important to myself. That's very new worldy. But yeah, you are right. You are right. If you want a good house, you got to have good foundations. And I suppose I would be the foundation of that scenario. So you're right. You're right.
100%. I'm glad you accepted that. I'm glad you just paused and thought about that one.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. You're right. You see, that was, again, a bit of a curvy one, that one, but I like it. I like it. Yeah, and to get it, you get yourself right, and everything else should, will at least has a better chance of falling into place if you can get yourself right.
100%. 100%. Tom, it's been a bloody pleasure, and I hope this isn't going to be the one and only time we get to talk. I think there's so much more to uncover, if I'm being honest.
Oh, for sure.
I hope being on the Hurt Locker podcast hasn't been too painful for you.
Not at all.
We would welcome you back.
Yinky, we got to talk about me for an hour. That's as a stand-up comedian, we're very into ourselves. So this has been fun. I can't wait to hear me back about me. This is tremendous.
The Hurt Locker is a safe space for our guests to openly share their mental health experiences. If you have been affected by any of the content in this recording, then please reach out for support. If it is an emergency, dial 999. If you would like to talk to somebody today, then please call the Samaritans on 116 123. Stay safe.